What's going on, everybody? Miles Youngblood here again at the Beyond Ordinary podcast, where we connect with great people doing great things to hopefully inspire you to do the same. And I'm here with a great individual, Dmitriy Shakhnevich. He owns his own law firm practice out here in New York City, and he specializes in criminal defense, personal injury, and of course, entertainment law. Give it up, everybody, for Dmitriy Shakhnevich.
Miles, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Of course, man. Of course. Man, there's so many prominent cases going on right now. I don't even know where to start, but I think it's only right if we start with the Harvey Weinstein case. Obviously, you know, that's been in the news heavily, and it just got overturned. And I know here in New York, there's a propensity of evidence, and I just kind of wanted you to touch on what that is and why that played a huge prominence in the case.
So Harvey Weinstein's conviction was overturned on appeal here in New York. And the reason it was overturned on appeal is because of what they call, what you kind of alluded to, improper propensity evidence, right? So obviously everybody that goes to trial in New York, or most people, let's say, they have some bad stuff in their past. And prosecutors try to push a lot of that stuff into the case because it looks bad in front of the jury, right? And the job of the defense lawyer is to keep a lot of that stuff out of the case. And the reason you want to keep it out of the case is if the case goes to a jury, the jury has to render a verdict based on the evidence, based on the facts of the case, not all this other stuff that'll make the defendant look bad. And so that's what happened here, right? Harvey Weinstein was charged with all these sexual assault offenses. And there were several women that were testifying as to the charged crimes, right? What he was actually charged with. And then there were a bunch of other women that came forward and said, well, he did this to me as well, and me too, right?
Played a huge part.
And so we want to participate in the trial. And the prosecutor said, great, except they can't really do that to show that he's a bad guy, to show that he has bad character, right? What they have to do is they have to connect those pieces of information, those instances of conduct with the charged crimes. How similar are they? How relevant are they? Is there a common pattern? Is there a common scheme? Is there something that took place that could help the jury with context, paint a broader picture? And I think they tried to bring in 12. The motions were made by the lawyers, and the judge ultimately admitted 4 of them. And then they testified, he was convicted, and ultimately the case went up on appeal, and the appellate court, the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court here in New York, said that was improper. There were too many of those witnesses that came in, and so the verdict had to be overturned. And now they may retry him again.
Right. In terms of the propensity of evidence, is there a way for it to be relevant to the case if the evidence brought forward is pretty much one for one, you know, what he's being charged with and the evidence outside of, you know, what is being brought forward?
So it has to be very closely connected. However, it can't be outweighed, right? The rule is the probative value can't be outweighed by the prejudicial effect. What that means is the relevancy, the usefulness of that evidence can't be outweighed by the fact that it may taint defendant. And that's what happened here. So even if it is really relevant, you can't walk in all 12 of them because then it'll be highly prejudicial, right? The degree to which he'll be harmed by this evidence is something that heavily outweighs the relevance. And therefore, the verdict that's rendered before, or rather by the jury, is tainted, right? That's what happened here, basically.
Most definitely. So somebody else in the news that might, you know, this might affect is obviously Diddy. For those of you that don't know, Diddy has been charged, or not charged, a lot of allegations have come forward by a lot of accusations, right? One of which was Cassie, and Cassie and them settled within like 24 hours, right? My question to you, if somebody does settle so quickly and then later on is charged, could they use that settlement as kind of like an admission of guilt?
So it's totally different, right? That's what happened here, right? There was a civil lawsuit, and the civil lawsuit involved allegations that sounded criminal, right? And you know what they are, and I know what they are. And what happened was folks jumped on that and said, well, now he has to go to jail. But he can't go to jail if you sue him because only the government can throw you in jail. Another person can't throw you in jail. They sued, and he settled, right? And that doesn't mean that the allegations underlying the lawsuit can't be used to form a criminal case, right? The government, the police, whether it's local, state, federal, all the arms of the federal government, right? The FBI, the CIA, all the other entities that may investigate him, whoever they are, can use those allegations to build a case against him, possibly charge him, indict him, but that hasn't happened yet. There have been search warrants executed. Search warrants being executed is
he's
not
been raided.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. Nobody wants to be raided.
Of course not.
And that doesn't usually mean that something good is going to happen, but you never know. You never know.
Of course not. Touching on him being raided, I want to ask you, what does it take for the feds to like raid your house? Do you have to be charged? Like, what is kind of like the burden?
Yeah, they got to get a search warrant, right? So they have to go before so big picture, right? The Fourth Amendment says that the government can't search you, they can't seize your property unless they get a warrant, and that warrant has to be based on probable cause.
Right.
But over time, that's been expanded because the courts have recognized that if you have a police officer that, for example, who witnesses something on the street, he's not going to go run and get a warrant. That wouldn't be a useful thing to do. And so all of these exceptions have been carved out, and many people know of these exceptions, right? Things like stop and frisk and plain view and search incident to arrest. There are so many exceptions, they basically swallow the rule.
Right.
However, virtually none of those apply when dealing with the home. You can't get in somebody else's home in this country without a warrant, really. It's called a castle doctrine. There's a rule, right, that says your home is your castle, and the government can't come in unless there is a warrant issued or some real extreme exigency, something that's dangerous or possibility that evidence will be lost. And so they got a warrant, and in order for them to get a warrant, they have to go to a judge. They have to raise their hand under oath and testify, essentially, that they know what happened as it relates to the underlying criminal conduct. They have reason to believe that if they execute this warrant, they're going to find evidence of criminality. And again, probable cause, relatively low standard. And if a judge signs that warrant, then they can execute.
Most definitely, most definitely. Definitely not good if the feds raid you. It's probably looking really slow, but we'll just see as things unfold.
We'll see.
But in terms of some of the accusations and allegations alleged with Diddy, some of those date all the way back to the 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
How do you even go to trial with something that's so old and like try to recall some of those things and have a fair trial at that?
And it's tough, right? That's why statutes of limitations exist.
Right.
Right. The legal system has essentially carved out time limits in which you must either sue somebody or bring charges. The reason for that is the system understands that witnesses forget, evidence is lost. Exactly. And so you don't want to allow a defendant to go to trial, have his or her rights compromised based on that kind of thing. And so they had statutes of limitations put in place. However, ever since the Me Too movement, several states, executives in several states have expanded those statutes as it relates to sexual assault cases. In New York, that happened. That's why there was an influx of lawsuits filed around the time that the Cassie lawsuit was filed against other famous folks. And so statutes of limitations are real. They exist for that reason, but they've also been played with in the past several years.
Most definitely, most definitely. I know there's a Survivors Act which kind of allows survivors to file civil lawsuits. And stuff like that.
That's the New York law, right?
New York.
Yep.
Okay, cool. And then one thing that always stumped me is that Diddy is such a prominent like figure, and this has been going on for so long. And so I always thought, like, how is this like possible that this could go on for so long and nobody say anything? And the only thing that I could think about is I know when celebrities like bring people into their home, they like sign NDAs and stuff like that. So my question to you is, if somebody does do that, they sign an NDA, they go to Diddy's home or whoever's house,
right,
and they witness what they believe is a crime, are they even allowed to report that, or does that NDA kind of like protect that person?
An NDA is a contract. You can't contract around somebody going to the police. It's not allowed, right? It's extortion.
Right.
You can't tell somebody I'm going to give you money and therefore you don't go to the police. Now, if somebody breaches that contract, you could sue them for damages. Right? You can sue them for money, and if it's a good NDA, it'll have clauses in there designating sums of money. So he could sue those folks potentially, depending on the NDA, but he can't stop people from testifying. He can't stop people from going to the police. NDAs don't cover that kind of reporting.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That would be a crazy world if we lived in. You just signed an NDA and you pretty
can't
much
do that. And then that does make sense, right? You can't do that.
Yeah, most def. And then another person that also has been raided in recent history is Andrew Tate. And for those of you who don't know Andrew Tate, he was once the most Google man on the planet for saying, some controversial things and utilizing TikTok, YouTube, all that stuff to get everywhere. And he ended up getting deplatformed. And one thing that he's definitely admit in some of his content is that he does exaggerate some of his points for the views.
Yeah.
And so my question to you, especially as a content creator, like, how do you feel about, deplatforming or censorship like online?
Yeah, that's a tough one. See, I'm a big free speech guy. I'm big on free speech. And there are a couple of things about free speech that people don't know. First of all, only the government is subject to constitutional muster.
What does that mean?
That means that private parties can do whatever they want as long as they don't discriminate effectively. They can deplatform you, they can cancel you, they can take you off of their online mechanisms, right? They can do all that fairly easily if you, particularly, for example, violate terms and conditions and other things. You can't argue free speech, at least not legally, unless you're dealing with the government, right?
Okay.
Now, the principles utilized in that, right? We in this country enjoy free speech because we enjoy this whole idea of thoughts being thrown out into the public forum and the best one succeeding. And so look, maybe private companies should adopt some of that. Who knows? But they don't have to. So free speech doesn't exist when you're dealing with YouTube or Facebook or anything else. It only exists when you deal with the government. Now, that makes it tough, right? Because you're at the mercy of these platforms and they can effectively do whatever they want. And there's really no remedy for it. If they violate their own terms and conditions, if they discriminate, perhaps you could do something legally, but otherwise it's very tough. And that's why, it's very hard to get uncanceled, right? And you're dealing with a private platform.
Exactly. One thing that you said is that as long as they don't discriminate, could a defense, like in Andrew Tate's defense, be that he has, been discriminated against?
Yeah,
in a way?
These defenses typically rely on, it's an extension of civil rights litigation, right? Civil rights legislation. And what that basically says is that you have to belong to a protected class. Right, so discriminating against somebody because of their ideas isn't necessarily protected. Right, if you discriminate against them because of their race or background or religion or nationality, that's different. But discrimination isn't that wide a term, at least not legally speaking.
Most definitely. So another reason why Andrew Tate has kind of been in the hot seat is for his product called The War Room. And for those of you that don't know, The War Room, from my knowledge, it's supposed to be top secret, but is a group of men that strive to better their life, and you got to pay $5,000. It's almost like a fraternity, basically. And I know you have to sign some sort of document, NDA, and a lot of people call it almost like a cult, because he has almost like a cult-like following.
Right. And
my question to you is, are cults inherently illegal? And if not, is there a way for a cult to be illegal?
Are cults inherently illegal? That's actually a good question.
Yeah.
No assembly of any group is inherently illegal, right? Now, if you assemble a group to commit a crime, that's a different story. But no, you can assemble freely in this country. Again, he's charged with things in other countries, but I'm not a lawyer in those countries, so I can only talk about the law here. You can assemble for any reason you want. You can express yourself in any way you want. You can speak in any way you want, generally, unless you're endangering others or committing crimes. So a cult, I suppose, legally wouldn't be illegal per se, because it's just a gathering of people. But I know that term carries negative connotation, and typically cults are assembled for bad purposes, so they can certainly, and have in the past, right, been transformed into criminal enterprises and prosecuted.
Most definitely. So I kind of want to transition more into you and your career. And my question to you is, what made you want to be a lawyer, get into law?
I don't know how to do anything else.
Really?
Yeah, and that's the answer. I got a job at a law firm in high school. I was a young kid. I enjoyed it. Over time, I wanted to go into criminal law, so I did a few internships here and there. I enjoyed that, and then I went to law school. I graduated law school. I was supposed to be a prosecutor here in Brooklyn. That didn't work. And so I had to open up my own law firm, and that was over a decade ago, and so that's what I've been doing since. I enjoy it. It's a good way to make a living, and if you treat people well, you're going to do well in this business. And maybe some people won't agree with that, but at least that's my perspective.
That's your part. So what was the toughest part about going to law school?
What was the toughest part about going to law school? It's funny, in this country, at least for me, I went to college. You don't really do much in college. Law school was the first experience that I had where I had to really work, put in long hours, challenge myself, push myself. And so it was terrific. I mean, I really enjoyed law school. And
Very
law school is
interesting.
funny because law school is, you think is the hardest thing in the world until you graduate, and then you have to do really hard things, right?
Really, it gets worse from there.
It's the practice of law is a tough line of work. I love it, but it's
Yeah.
a tough line of work, and not many people could run their own businesses, their own practices, because it's really, really hard to navigate sometimes difficult waters and deal with clients, which is the hardest part of the whole thing.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I told myself I only got one degree, a bachelor's, and I told
Yeah.
myself there is no way that I was gonna do med school, law school, anything like that. Like nah, like I was one and done, man.
No, listen, but again, especially these days, formal schooling isn't required to get yourself out there and put content out there and do all these things. And so if that's
Exactly.
not where your heart is, you shouldn't do it.
Exactly, especially with the rise of online education. Like people
Yeah.
ask me all the time, like if like sometimes I'll go back and do these little panels on college and stuff like that, and people think I'm gonna do the traditional, go to college. I'm like, no, there's like. Now that I've been 4 years removed,
Yeah.
like there's so many other ways to make money, whether entrepreneurship, getting a free certificate from Google or something like that, learning just any skill, or
Yeah.
going to trade school if that. At that.
Absolutely. Look, you have to know yourself. And the one thing I did well, better than many people, and definitely better than most lawyers, is I learned what I was good at, and I was honest with myself about what I was good at very early on in life. Very early, my mid-20s probably,
Okay.
is when I sat down and I told myself, okay, I'm good at X, Y, and Z. I'm not so good at other things. Let me double down, triple down on what I'm good at. Let me plug the gaps that I have to plug. But let's not be dishonest with ourselves.
Exactly.
Because if you're dishonest with what you're good at, and we're all good at things and bad at things, and if you're dishonest at what you're good at, you go down a very difficult road. Because in addition to the hardships of your work, you're fighting with yourself the whole time, trying
Exactly.
to figure out and convince yourself that you're good at things that you're not. And so I never had that. Earlier than most people, I realized I'm good at certain things. I'm not good at other things. Let me act in light of that, right? That's what I did.
So my question to you is, how did you said you were like in your mid-20s when you figured out what you were good at, what you weren't good at? So
Yeah, well, in terms of qualities.
yeah. So a lot of times, like the panels I was talking about in terms of like college and stuff, these kids are like 17, 18 years old. And so it's like they don't know what they're good at,
Right.
and what they're not good at. So how would you kind of navigate that, like as like someone even younger than in their 20s?
Look, it is hard. When you're young, it's very hard to figure that out, right? If you're a lawyer or a law student, it's very hard to sit down and say, look, I'm not book smart. That's okay. You can still be very good at what you do.
Exactly.
Right? It's so it's hard to do it at 17. It's hard to do it at 18. Look, again, like I said, most people never do it. Most people go through life fighting with themselves, right? About what they're good at, about their personality traits, right? About how good they are on the inside, how bad they are on the inside, what their pros and cons are. That's a big, big struggle. And if you don't deal with that, you're going to have problems. Again, you don't have to be a lawyer to know that. That's just a life piece of advice. Not that I know many life pieces of advice, but that's one.
Exactly. That's honestly why I transitioned into podcasting, because I realized, honestly, I just like talking to people.
Yeah.
Like I can hold a pretty good conversation with anybody. So I'm just like, you know what, I might as well just do it.
Absolutely.
There's so many shows out there, so I might as well start my own.
Absolutely.
So you have a very interesting story in terms of how when you first graduated from law school, and then you got that job as a prosecutor, and then that Black Swan event happened. You want to tell the people about like how that went down?
So if you want to do criminal law, right, the conventional route is to become a prosecutor first. And the understanding is you'll get a whole ton of courtroom experience and trial experience, because you'll be trying all these cases on behalf of the government, right, trying to put people in jail and other things. And then once you do that, you won't make any money when you do it, but when you're done, you can graduate and you'll have a ton of experience and you can go on and do other things.
Right.
And so that's what I did. So I tried to become a prosecutor, and in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn DA's office is a well-known prosecutorial office in New York City. I interned there many times. I ultimately got an interview with a guy named Charles Hines, who was the Brooklyn DA for, 30 years. I guess 89 he was elected or came into office. He left 2013. So do the math. It was a long time, nearly 20 years. And every X amount of years. It was 4 years he would run for office and get reelected. And I interviewed with him in 2012, and I got the job. And this is, again, if you want to do criminal law, this is the job. So it's very hard to get this job. I think the year that I applied, 4,000 applicants applied and 50 get the job.
That's
so
crazy.
It's virtually impossible. And I'm not good with numbers in terms of, there are statistics that weigh against the minority that I'm usually not in the minority. You know what I mean? Like I usually don't get that position.
Exactly.
But I got this one. And so I interviewed with him and I sat down with him and he goes, all right, look, there are 2 ways that you can not be a DA come next year. I said, okay. He said, you got to pass the bar.
Okay.
Because you got to be admitted to practice. And I got to get reelected. So I said, okay, strange conditions. But he sent me the offer letter. I signed the offer letter.
Of course.
I passed the bar. And then I was looking at the history. And the last time a Brooklyn DA got unelected was 1911. So it was over 100 years prior to when I was.
So the odds were definitely in your favor.
So I was like, okay, I mean, what are the chances? I can't be the one. And Charles Hines is a guy who in the press had a tough history in terms of selectively prosecuting and not complying with kind of advanced methods to justice, right? And you can have a debate as to whether or not that's true. But ultimately, he ran against a guy named Ken Thompson, who was a civil rights lawyer and a former federal prosecutor, who's no longer alive. He passed from cancer for several years after being elected. So he won this election, and then I got an email from his staff saying, you can meet with us and we'll see if we'll keep you on. I met with him. He told me, well, I'm not telling you you're not getting the job, but if you have another offer, take that one. I said, well, then I should probably think I'm not getting the job. And so I didn't get the job. And so the problem is that whole process lasted over a year. So I was interviewing, kind of, but you can't really interview because as soon as somebody hears that you have this really, really hot job lined up, they're not going to hire you because they know that they're the contingency plan and nobody wants that.
While you were interviewing that?
Well, you have to be honest. You can't lie to people.
They ask?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't remember exactly how it went down, but oftentimes I would volunteer that information because what's the point of the rest of the interview, And so I was interviewing. I wasn't getting any real good jobs. I got a few offers, but they weren't anything that I was interested in really. And so ultimately what happened is I lost out on that job. And because I couldn't get another job, I had to start out on my own because that's the only thing you can do when you can't find work. Pretty much. It turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Thank God. I'm now over a decade in and it's been great. But, tough time. What can I say? Time of uncertainty.
Yeah, I know. That must be tough. Like you finish law school, you think you have a job lined up, and then all of a sudden you pivot.
And that job. I mean, it's tough to get a job like that. That's a real desirable job. Exactly. I mean, I don't know how it is now. I hear now that it's not as desirable. Back then, it was a really big deal.
So kind of take us back to like your mentality at the time, like when all this like news was coming out, like you were like your future is kind of uncertain. Like how did you like kind of get through that, man?
You try to do everything you can. I've always been a go-getter. So I tried to do everything I can and talk to people that maybe would have some insight into what I should do. But ultimately, you kind of just have to, throw yourself to the forces of the world. Like, what can you do? You're in Brooklyn. People are going to vote. And I can't control an election. And so I said, look, let me think ahead. If this happens, I'll open up on my own. And I started putting that into place already. So by the time this happened, my wife always tells me, you took it so well. I don't know if I took it well, but I landed on my feet pretty quickly because I was preparing for the worst. I do that a lot in life.
Most definitely. Yeah, I got to pray for the best, but
prepare for the worst.
Prepare for the worst.
I prepare for the worst and everything.
Got to be. So how did you go about building your law firm as, young, ambitious entrepreneur? Like, I know that must have been a tough process. Like, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, it's tough. So look, again, I anticipated the worst. Right. So in that period of time that I was in flux, I worked for terrific lawyers. I learned from some of the best lawyers in this city. And I worked for them, for the most part, for free, which, was a luxury. Not many people could do that. But I could, not that I came from money or anything, but I was able to do that for some time. And so I worked and I learned a lot. And in New York, there are public defender panels where experienced criminal lawyers try cases for indigent defendants. So I paired up with some of those lawyers. I was in court all the time, trying cases with them, second seating them, interviewing clients, doing arraignments. And so over time, I just got better and better and better and better. And by the time I went out on my own, and by the time I started picking up clients, I became good at what I...
Yeah, it sounds like you were pretty much just skill stacking. Damn, try saying that 5 times fast. Skill stacking until you got your practice off the ground.
I'll tell you, I worked all the time. I worked all the time. Now it's harder because I have kids and but I worked all the time and I loved it. I loved working all the time. I don't know what it is. I would wake up at 5 in the morning and I would just keep going and going. And it's funny when you do criminal law, you're like an emergency guy.
Yeah.
They
call you at any time of night.
That's right. And I do family law and divorce cases now. So I'm an emergency guy. And I just love it. People call me all the time. I was in court on Wednesday, this past Wednesday. I was in court until midnight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because these new arrests, they come in so quickly. The courts remain open longer for these particular cases. So I was in court late on Wednesday. That's my bread and butter, right? I answer the phone when other people don't. And I'm totally good with that. Everybody has my cell phone in the world. Every client has my cell phone. I'm not afraid of getting out my cell phone. Some lawyers are. That's fine. I'm not. I'm not that important to not have my cell phone out there, So I do that a lot. And so I love that hustle. I don't know. I enjoy it. I feel like I'm doing something important even if I'm not.
It sounds like just the law profession, people just call you whenever, pull you in every which way, and it's just like it's almost like controlled chaos. So like, how do you like manage your time, stress, like
what's
in
tough?
those seasons?
What's the toughest part, especially when you do what I do, which is again, I do like nobody's happy to see me at the outset. Nobody's even happy to see me probably throughout and at the end, right? I deal in hostility all the time.
Yeah.
Hostility all the time, because if you're going to jail, if you're losing your kids, if you're losing your business, if you're being arrested, if your house is being raided, right? You're inherently hostile. So I could be the nicest guy in the world, but my clients are going to be hostile because they're in a hostile environment.
Yeah.
And I am the guy that deals with that hostility, and gladly. Right? But I deal with that hostility. So that's the most difficult part. And I don't know if that'll ever change unless I stop taking those calls. I don't really want to stop taking those calls.
What makes you like that hostility? Like, do you like thrive off that? Like,
no, it goes back to what we spoke about a second ago. I learned what I'm good at. I'm good at taking crap. Yeah. I'm very good at that. Some of it I wasn't good at the beginning. I learned to get better over time. But when I need to, I can take a beating. Right? Which not a lot of people can do. A lot of people have pride and have other things. I have pride. Yeah. But if you're dealing with a client who gives you money and expects you to help them, you deal with that person. It's your job to adjust. It's your job to make movements so that that person is happy and comfortable to the extent possible, not you. And so I will give you my cell phone because that's my job. My job is to provide comfort. My job is, not only to go into court and yell at people and win cases. That's obviously the biggest part of my job. And then there are other parts of my job, which involves counseling clients, making them feel better about the situation, telling them my experience, recommending routes if I have to. And I do that all the time, and I enjoy doing that because I think I'm good at it. Right? I may not be good at certain academic elements of the law. Right? If you come to me to try to take your labor relations case to the Supreme Court, go somewhere else. I'm not that guy, but I will. If you're in trouble, I'll take you by the hand and I'll walk you across the street and we'll figure it out. And I'm good at that. I'm good at that particular thing.
No, most definitely. One thing that you said that really resonated with me was the fact that you talked about how you could just take a beating. And in entrepreneurship, like, you pretty much have to do that. Like, you just have to have that thick skin and just, keep getting back up. Like, and sometimes it's not even about being better than the competition. You just got to outlast people,
You have to be honest with yourself, right? Look, at the end of the day, I'm very good at what I do. Very good at what I do. But there are a lot of guys in this business that look like me and that, have neat haircuts and nice beards, right? And all that other stuff. Yeah. And the only way that you win is by being better to people, right? And the way in my line of work that you are good to people is by answering the phone and dealing with them. Now, that doesn't mean that if a client calls me or a prosecutor calls me or somebody and they harass and abuse me, that I'll take that. I don't.
Exactly.
But you have to know what you're good at, and I'm good at dealing in hostility. I'm very good at that. I'm very good, as you know, as they say, I'm very comfortable being uncomfortable. That's the phrase.
Great trait to have.
Yeah.
So if you could go back and change anything differently about like your journey as being a law firm owner, what would you do?
Oh man, I can't say. I don't know if I would do anything differently because things worked out.
Exactly.
I don't know if I would do things in life differently because things worked out. I'm pretty happy. That's not to say that there aren't issues here and there, and I don't have problems like all of us, but I'm happy. And so, yeah, I regret a million things every day. Should I have said this differently, written this differently, sent this differently, argued this differently? So I regret things every day. Big picture, I can't say I regret much. Not big picture. Big picture has been, you know, whether it's my personal life, my professional life, big picture, I've been good.
You've been good? There's no like other maybe hire that you wish you would have did differently, like, or structured your business differently? Like you keep
Well, you can't really say that because you don't know where that would have led.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't really say that I should have maybe avoided this client or I should have avoided. Yeah, I can go back and say, wow, I shouldn't have taken on this case. That turned out to be a real pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But I can't really say that because I probably learned something from that experience. I just may not be able to put a finger on it. But I know, you know, it's very hard to rewrite history because you don't know, right? You don't know. And if you're unhappy, then you should probably think about these kinds of decisions that you made.
Exactly.
But I'm generally happy, right? Day to day, we all have worries, struggles, but I'm generally happy.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a saying that I like. It goes, your life is, where you are in life right now is the sum of all the decisions that you made.
Sure.
So like you wouldn't be here if you didn't make those decisions in the past.
Yeah.
So like if you're happy with where you're at now, then it's like you made all the right decisions. Even the ones that at the time probably didn't seem like they were the best decision. You know? Most definitely. So going through some of your website and stuff like that, you said that your firm likes to defend individuals over businesses. What kind of led you down that route?
Well, when you deal in criminal law, right, you typically deal with people. And when you deal in domestic relations cases, family cases, divorce cases, custody, child support, the list goes on. You're typically dealing with people. I have a lot of business clients as well. I obviously don't represent big businesses as it relates to, you know, I don't have
like
banks on retainer.
Exactly.
But,
that'd be nice, but
you know, but I represent mostly either individuals or businesses that could be classified as a small business. You know, and I enjoy that, because there's an interpersonal dynamic that exists in those kinds of cases.
Of course.
And in those kinds of relationships. And again, I'm good at that. And so I enjoy it. I get pleasure out of it.
Exactly. You kind of identified that earlier, that was kind of your strength, to kind of work with individuals as opposed to working with like big businesses.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't want that to be misunderstood. If you don't mistake my kindness for weakness, right? So don't, you know, if you're a client, don't call me up and start yelling at me.
Exactly.
That's not going to be good either. But I'm very good at dealing with that kind of stress.
Definitely. And then also, you know, your firm emphasizes the importance of authenticity and then quote unquote not selling oneself. Like, what is that?
Yeah, I've never sold myself to anybody.
What does that mean in terms of like the law profession, like, or selling yourself?
Well, you'll never hear me tell a client that I'm the smartest guy in the room.
Gotcha.
Because I'm usually not. You'll never hear me tell a client that I have all these awards, even though I do, and I don't know if they matter. But you will. So I don't sell myself, right? I don't tell a client, here's why I think you should hire me over the other guy. What I tell the client is the truth every time.
Every time.
That I will answer the phone every time or call you back within a certain period of time. And that within very broad latitude, whatever you need from me, I will do, right? If it's within the bounds and the rules of ethics and it's within the rules of the law, then I will do whatever I have to do to help you. And I will, right? And I didn't graduate top of my class in law school. I didn't have the best grades. I never had the best grades in middle school and elementary school and high school. So I'm not that guy, but I'm good being the other guy.
Good being yourself.
Yeah.
So not selling yourself, you mean like you really just don't I'm not gonna say you don't advertise, because obviously you advertise your firm.
Yeah, I don't really advertise much anymore, at least not directly. When I started out, I would a little bit, but building a successful law practice is really a function of time. So you're not going to advertise yourself into success unless you're Celino and Barnes or whatever, right? You're not going to, because that'll, especially these days with social media, that takes a real comprehensive effort. In my experience, it's just word of mouth.
Okay.
Just be good to people, help people, and over time, it'll grow.
So you kind of started off with mainly like referrals and inbound leads and stuff like that?
Yeah, I started out doing a lot of things. I started out doing work for other lawyers. Didn't make a lot of money, but I got a lot of experience. I started out doing that, and then I would take on cases, and I would do my very best to do a good job, and usually I would. And usually clients were happy with me to the extent that they could be happy with me in that kind of environment. Because you're not always going to be happy with the person by your side when you're going through problems.
Most definitely.
And so over time, once I did that, and I got better and better and better, and more people would come and come and come. And so that's why it just grew naturally, organically.
Naturally.
You know?
And do you still use that kind of model to this day?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Ain't broken, ain't
It
fixed.
just grows, right?
Yeah.
It grows, thankfully, knock on wood, it grows because the client base grows.
Exactly. Good to hear, man. And then I know we touched about this earlier in the conversation about, law school and stuff like that. And did law school prepare you to be a law firm owner?
No. Law school doesn't prepare you for anything. I mean, law school...
It's like a prerequisite just because to weed people out.
Law school, more often than not, is purely a business endeavor, right? There are certain restrictions placed upon lawyers in terms of who can be licensed. That means that you have to graduate law school. That's typically approved by the ABA or some other organization. And if you do that, that's the only way you can become a lawyer. But law school is very good for about a year and a half. Because it teaches you contracts, and it teaches you the underpinnings of criminal law, and the underpinnings of trusts and wills, and the underpinnings of civil procedure, right? These are all important. You have to know those things. So law school is important because it teaches you that. But, starting at the end of your first year, you should really get out there. And then, because law school will only get you so far. It'll teach you certain things. My law school experience, the second and third year, particularly the third year, I was taking sports law and other things, which were really interesting topics. I mean, I enjoyed them, but it's not something that'll prepare you to practice. Let's put it that way.
Most definitely. And then another thing we talked about was like how you thrived in hostility, that's what we talked about. How you thrived in hostility.
Yeah.
So how do you foster like kind of a positive working environment through the chaos like within your firm?
Well, again, in my line of work, I'm kind of the doorstop. So I'm gonna take a lot of the beating, and I don't project that onto other people because other people won't take it, and rightfully so, right? You're not gonna hire somebody and pay them less than what you're being paid to do what you're doing on the same level. It wouldn't be fair to that person, right? So I'm not gonna hire somebody that's gonna answer the phone at midnight because I'm not gonna pay them as much as I'm getting paid, and so they probably shouldn't be doing that. Right? And the benefits that I'm getting from that aren't the same that they're getting from that. Maybe they don't want that. It's very hard to find somebody that'll do what you do for your business the same way that you will.
Of course.
And law is no different. Law is just, a lot of lawyers, they paint law as this kind of calling, right? This calling to nobility, to integrity. And it is all that. And it can be all that. But it really is work. It's just a business, right? You build it the same way you build any other business, right? Be practical, be honest, and that's it. So it's just a business. So I treat it like a business, right? I'm not a very good businessman, but I become better over time as I become a better lawyer over time.
Of course.
And so I don't really like to, tell people to take crap. Because it's not fair. Yeah. Not other lawyers who do work for me, and not other people who do work for me.
Okay. So what are you kind of like telling them like how to navigate through the hostility and stuff?
Well, they don't oftentimes deal with clients the same way that I do.
Oh, they don't?
Right? No.
Oh, okay.
I deal with a lot of that myself. Right? The clients are are my responsibility. And so I deal with the clients. And the clients want that because they want me.
Exactly.
Right? And I want to do that too because I want to show them that I'm involved, and I am.
Okay. So I'm not too familiar in terms of like how like the structure is. So like what are like kind of they doing? Like what's their main role and responsibility?
Well, I have like anybody else. I have lawyers that do paperwork for me. I have lawyers that make court appearances for me. I have lawyers that help me with the day-to-day work because there's a lot of that. I can't do that all on my own.
Yeah.
No lawyer who runs a successful practice does because there's a lot of work. And so you hire good people that do good work, and that's what I've done. And they prepare that paperwork, they prepare the motions, they prepare some of the pleadings, they prepare some of the other paperwork. They go to court oftentimes for me to appear in court. So they do that kind of stuff. This is it's commonplace for all lawyers. That's basically how the industry works.
Yeah, most def. And what it like. I think that every entrepreneur pretty much has like kind of like that drive, like that battery in their back to keep going. Where does yours come from? And like what are you doing to continue to like push forward?
Oh man, that's a good question. I don't know. I think that I never ever growing up, I wasn't very good in school, and I wasn't somebody I really never had terribly high expectations for myself.
Mm-hmm. Really?
And so I never
Why?
did. Because I just never did. I don't know why. Maybe, I don't know. Who knows? And so once I started doing really well, I don't want to let that go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I work harder and harder and harder because I found something that I'm very good at and that provides a life for my family that I never had, which is nice. And so I work really, really hard to keep that, and that's what drives me. That's what keeps me going.
Most definitely. Got to keep going. You built something great, and you kind of just want to just maintain it.
Yeah, I don't want to. I love it. I don't want to lose it.
Yeah. Most definitely. Speaking of losing it, I've had on my Instagram, sometimes I'll joke around about like AI, and I've seen like different posts about how like, AI is going to take over and stuff like that. And then I've had people swipe up who are in law school like, nah, AI can't replace lawyers, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, right. So I was like, okay. So let me ask someone who owns their own law profession, how do you like feel about AI and the disruption, and has it disrupted your industry at all?
I don't know much about AI. I'm so not a science guy. I mean, I've never been. And AI isn't just science, it's an advanced form, right? I know very little about how that stuff works. There are certainly elements of the legal profession that are replaceable, right? And there are certainly elements of it that are replaceable by things like AI. Anybody who tells you otherwise is just lying. So I'm assuming over time, barring some regulations or barring other things, that AI will work its way into the legal profession. How the legal profession will adjust to that is a different story. I don't know if it'll work its way into the legal profession such that all lawyers will be entirely obsolete. I don't think that'll happen either. Because I don't know if AI could answer the phone at midnight the same way that I can all the time, right? Yeah. So I don't think it's going to render all lawyers obsolete, but it's a threat in the sense that there are numerous elements of the legal profession that could be updated, let's say it that way.
Updated? Like what? Like what professions would?
Elements of the legal profession, right? The certain, perhaps, elements of drafting and other things of that nature. That could, legal research, that's a big one. A lot of lawyers spend a lot of time and clients' money legal researching. So that's something that AI, I suppose, could deal with. But I can't imagine that'll happen anytime soon in any real way. And then the legal profession will have to adjust to it, and because the profession is structured in a certain way ethically, and otherwise they'll have to deal with that somehow. But I can't imagine that'll happen anytime very soon. Oh
yeah, probably not anytime soon, but I mean, I use a lot of AI in my business and my media company mainly because like we're using content, like so I can enhance audio, I could manually cut up the clips and stuff like that. So I've been just trying to like utilize AI. I don't think that AI will like pretty much like take over like any industry like completely, but there are some industries that it'll impact more than others. So if you guys aren't on the AI wave, like start learning how to utilize AI, because I think that people that learn how to use AI will be ahead. I don't think it's ever going to replace anybody, but eventually jobs are it's going to be like almost like a requirement. Like, do you have experience with this?
Listen, the world moves forward, right? They said that TV was going to kill things. They said that the computer was going to kill things, the internet, social media. The world is going to move, man. Exactly. You have to move with it.
Exactly.
The world's going to move.
Just like you said, like, when the social media came out and people thought, oh, like, you know,
They still do.
yeah,
They think it's like the next coming of the worst thing in human history. And there are obviously bad elements to it. But
yeah,
the world will move. AI will come. Or whatever.
and it's here to stay.
You know, it's absolutely here to stay. And then over time, whatever next will come along. You know, it's like anything else in life.
Hell yeah. So I want to transition to your interview with F. Lee Bailey. And for those of you that don't know, F. Lee Bailey was one of the lawyers that was on the Dream Team that helped defend O.J. Simpson. I just want to know what was like your biggest takeaway from that interview?
Oh, that's funny. So I did. So one of the good things about having your own law practice is that you can extend yourself in different ways and you could scratch itches, right? And so I've, obviously practicing law is my primary line of work. That's what I do. That's what I love to do. That's what I devote a large majority of my time to doing. And then there are other things that I like doing. So I've been teaching. I've done that for years, right? I don't do it now, but I've done it for years. And podcasting. And the reason I like podcasting is I like to talk to people. I like to talk to people that I consider important. And I did that interview years ago. F. Lee Bailey he passed in 2021. I did this interview in 2018, so many years ago. But he's somebody who was, he's probably the best known trial lawyer of the 20th century. By the time he did the OJ case, he was a bit older later on in his career. But he's argued for the Supreme Court. He's represented Sam Shepard and Ernest Medina in the My Lai massacre. You know, important cases. Boston Strangler, right? And so I always like to pick the brains of those kinds of people. And so that's why I did that interview, and I'm very happy I did it, especially because he was older then. He's no longer around, and that was a big deal.
Big deal. Anything that stood out to you, any insights that you got that helped you in either, you know, running your practice or anything to help with clients or anything that you took away from the interview?
Well, you know, by that point, my practice was pretty much set. I mean, you know, I was about maybe 5 years into my practice. I had a pretty good idea of where I was going. So I didn't need to talk to him for educational purposes. Not me. Maybe other people, but not me. But I enjoyed talking to him because he had experience that very few people have. Trial work has gone down over the years, right? Not as many cases are being tried anymore. Lawyers from his generation would try cases all the time. He was unique because he was, a celebrity lawyer. He was a famous lawyer, so he would travel from state to state. But lawyers in New York City would try cases all the time. Some would try a dozen cases a year, right, which is incredibly rare. That doesn't happen anymore. It's always fun to talk to these people, you know?
Yeah, most definitely. One thing that kind of stood out to me in your interview with him is that he said that military courts are more effective in not convicting innocent people. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. So, like, why don't we adopt kind of like that structure, like, everywhere? Well,
because civilian courts, as opposed to military courts, are governed by different rules, right? Trial by jury of your peers, those are different things. Military courts are inherently within the military. So everybody involved is a military person, whether it's a juror or a judge, right? Okay. In civilian courts, it's very different. So obviously it's a very different system than the court-martial system that they have there, the military legal system.
Okay, that's very interesting. I didn't know that everybody in military court, like even the jury, was picked by...
Yeah, everybody's in the military, right? That's the idea.
That makes sense then, because like obviously if everybody's in the military, you're not going to want to throw like your soldier in jail if like they didn't do it.
Not that civilian juries should do that either. Right. But if you're in a military court, military tribunal, it's a different line of work.
Yeah, most definitely. I kind of want to also touch on your experience as a professor and a YouTuber, like kind of like give us an insight on like what made you want to.
So, you know, when I started my practice, I didn't have much work. Like anybody who starts a business.
Yeah, of course.
And so I had to make money somehow. And one of the ways that I wanted to make money was teaching. And so I got a job teaching and then at one school here in New York. And then I taught at John Jay for 6 years over the past 6 years. And again, that's just something I enjoy doing. And then when COVID hit, all classes went remote. And I've never used Zoom or anything else, but I had to learn how to use it.
Exactly.
And as I was using it, you know, I would do my lectures and the students would be on the screen, you know, in those little boxes. And I would see their kids running around and other things. And I said, guys, why don't you turn off your cameras? Because I don't want anybody to see what's going on in your home with your families.
Yeah.
And so they did that, and then the engagement kind of became difficult to maintain because nobody was on camera. I couldn't see anybody.
Yeah.
And so what ultimately happened was I started this YouTube channel where I would interview people and post it on YouTube as educational material. And then it took off, and I got relatively important people to come on, people that are a lot more important than me, which isn't that hard to be more important than me, but people that are more important than me to come on and talk to me. And I posted that content. And so once I did that, people started engaging in it. And I still do it just because I still like doing it. You know, it's not anything I've ever made any money from. I don't plan on making money from it. I don't want to make any money from it.
Really?
But I enjoy doing it.
Okay.
You know, I can't afford too much time to it, which is a difficulty.
Yeah.
But I enjoy doing it, so I want to keep doing it.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, making content is definitely takes a lot of time, a lot more time than people realize. Like, you know, when you're just scrolling on Instagram or you're just watching a YouTube video, it's like, yeah, you just got that dopamine hit for, 30 seconds or
right.
watch the long form, but you don't realize like the person put like hours of time in prep.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, most definitely. But so what makes you like not want to like pursue like, be a famous law YouTuber or something like that? Like where you like have your own like show where you break down cases and stuff, something like that.
Because that takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take time away from what works.
Yeah.
Right. My law practice is, first of all, what I've been building for all this time, which is, so it's mine. It's in my heart. And it's also something that occupies most of my time and energy, as it should. Right. People pay you money to represent them. You shouldn't be on YouTube doing videos all the time. But I do enjoy it, so I do it when I can. But the practice of law is where all my energy really is. My clients, that's where my energy goes.
Most definitely,
as it should.
Most definitely. Yeah, and before we close out here, man, like, do you have any advice for somebody who's like starting a business or in the law field or something like that?
Again, know what you're good at. Know what you're good at. Take time. Be honest with yourself. Not everybody can do that. It's very hard to do. But be honest with yourself about what you're good at. Because in light of that, you can build a practice that suits your capabilities, right? Are you a talker? Are you a writer? Are you a trial lawyer? Are you a courtroom lawyer? Do you deal well with people, right? Answer those kinds of questions. And if you can do that honestly, you'll be ahead of the rest, because you'll be starting a practice knowing that I'm good at these things. Let me double down, triple down on these things. Let me figure out how to plug the other holes and gaps that I have. And then if you're able to do that, then you're on your way to building something successful. If you're not, it's going to be very hard, because like we said at the start, not only are you going to be dealing with the incredibly rigorous dealings of a legal profession, which is, it's very hard to practice law in this city, and it's very hard to run a law practice in this city. But not only are you going to be dealing with that, you're always going to be fighting with yourself to figure out why you're having difficulties. And the reason is, at least in my experience, is that you're not honest with yourself. And so you're always going to fight with yourself, and that's never good. It's a waste of time, energy, and it's not a recipe for success.
Most definitely. Yeah, so everybody out there, figure out what you're good at, really just stack those skills, and then once you figure out what you want to do, just go hard and don't give up, have that tough skin. But Dmitry, I know you have a YouTube channel, Instagram. You want to plug that real quick?
Yeah, so I'm, my name is Dmitriy Shakhnevich, so it's very long, and nobody could say it or write it or pronounce it. And so D-Shak Law, right, D-S-H-A-K Law, L-A-W, is what I am on everything: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and X, right? They call Twitter X now.
Exactly.
And on YouTube as well. And on YouTube, I do a lot of the stuff where I interview people and I give legal opinion. And if you're interested in that, take a look. And it's, I like doing it. I think it's pretty useful. Certainly, work to be done, but I enjoy it.
Most definitely. Yeah, I'll leave all of the links to his Instagrams and stuff like that in the description. And thank you again, Dmitry, for meeting with me. Another great individual, another great episode on the Beyond Ordinary podcast. Until then, peace.